The Grand Galactic Relic Run was a spectacle of pure speed. For the competing species of the Galactic Federation, a race was a test of explosive power, of instantaneous velocity, of a species' ability to conquer distance in the blink of an eye. The course spanned 1,000 miles across the jagged, twin-mooned landscape of the planet Earth. The first racer to touch the ancient relic at the finish line would be crowned champion of the cosmos. On the starting line, the crowd roared with anticipation. The favorites were an imposing sight. They were the six-limbed Thranks whose powerful, spring-loaded legs could propel them forward in terrifying, ground-eating leaps. Beside them were the elegant Sylvans, lithe and graceful beings from a high-gravity world, whose bodies were living springs of stored kinetic energy. In the center, a rolling, tireless Duran, a silicon-based life-form, whose momentum was its only weapon. They all shared a common philosophy. A race was won by speed, and speed was achieved by bursts of effort. And then there was Ethan Vance, a human. He was a small, unimposing figure by galactic standards, his bipedal form appearing absurdly fragile next to the muscular bulk of the other competitors. The intergalactic commentators, their voices filled with a mixture of amusement and pity, spoke of his species' lack of any truly impressive physical attributes. They called him a curiosity, a living relic of a bygone age. Ethan was a Terran ultramarathoner, an athlete whose discipline was entirely incomprehensible to the rest of the Federation. The starting signal bled a deep resonant hum that rattled the very ground. The Thranks exploded forward, a blur of motion, their multi-jointed legs pounding the earth. The Sylvans, with their effortless grace, shot past them, a fleeting streak of silver. The Duran began its slow, inevitable acceleration, a rolling boulder on a quest for unstoppable momentum. They were all a testament to the elegant science of speed. Ethan did not burst forward, he did not sprint, he did not leap, he simply began to walk. His movements were a perfect, rhythmic paradox. His heart rate was low and steady. His breath was an almost silent hiss. There was no wasted energy, no sudden bursts, no theatrical displays of power. He was not fast, he was not powerful, he simply moved forward, one foot in front of the other, at a pace that seemed insulting to the very concept of a race. The commentators fell silent, their amusement replaced by outright bewilderment. As the sun began to set on Ethos, the Thranks and the Sylvans had covered hundreds of miles. Their biometrics were at peak performance, but they had to rest. Their bodies demanded it, the biological need for recuperation a universal constant. The Duran, still accelerating, had covered half the distance, its momentum still growing. They set up camp, their tents glowing softly in the growing darkness, their bodies finally at rest. Far behind them, a lone figure moved in the gloom. Ethan Vance did not stop. He did not rest. He simply continued his slow, unblinking march, a solitary figure moving through the dark, an act of sheer illogical endurance. The Thranks, with their powerful, multi-jointed legs, were built for bursts of unimaginable speed. They could cross vast distances in a single, ground-shaking leap. But their bodies, a marvel of biokinetics, required long periods of rest to replenish their stored energy. The Sylvans, with their effortless grace, could maintain a constant high-speed sprint, their muscles tuned for a kind of effortless elegance. But their metabolisms burned through energy at an unsustainable rate, demanding long periods of recuperation. The Duran, a rolling, tireless silicon-based lifeform, was a machine of pure momentum, but it needed a perfectly flat surface and a long straight course to build up its formidable speed. The winding, jagged terrain of Ethos was its ultimate enemy, forcing it to slow down and lose its crucial momentum. As the twin moons rose high in the sky, the other competitors, exhausted and resting in their camps, checked their long-range scanners. They saw the blips of their rivals, each a glowing dot of energy, resting and dormant. And then, far behind them, they saw another blip. It was a single, dim flicker of light, moving at a slow, infuriatingly consistent pace. It was Ethan Vance, the human, the Thranks leader. His massive body, curled into a resting state, projected a thought of pure crystalline amusement to his team. The Terran still moves. He has not rested. His pace is a joke. He will be exhausted long before he reaches the finish line. The Sylvan, its lithe form coiled gracefully in a state of suspended animation, echoed the thought. He is inefficient. His method is a defiance of all athletic logic. A race is about speed. He has none. They were thinking with a logical, elegant mindset. They had a perfectly trained, perfectly tuned body, and they were using it in the most logical, efficient way possible. In bursts of maximum effort, followed by periods of complete, necessary rest. The human was simply walking, an act they had only seen in documentaries about the most primitive Terran cultures. His body was an inefficient, clumsy thing that could not achieve the speeds that theirs could. Therefore, he would lose. It was a simple mathematical certainty. They did not account for the biological absurdity of the human body. The human body, an illogical and messy creation, was not built for bursts of speed. It was built for endurance. For thousands of generations, Terran ancestors had not been sprinters. They had been persistent hunters, creatures who ran down their prey not with speed, but with relentless, unblinking, continuous effort. Their bodies, with their long legs, their low centers of gravity, and their sweat glands, were a biological testament to the art of the slow, continuous march. As the other races rested, their bodies still, their metabolisms slowing. Ethan's body hummed with a different kind of efficiency. His metabolism was a constant, low burn. His muscles were not resting. They were recuperating in motion. He was an engine of continuous. The sun, a fiery orange orb, began its climb into the sky, casting long dramatic shadows across the rugged landscape. The other racers who had spent the night resting and recuperating began their next leg of the race. The Thranks, refreshed and with their biokinetic energy replenished, exploded forward in powerful bursts. The Sylvans, with their lithe, graceful forms, maintained a constant high-speed sprint. The Duran, a rolling juggernaut of momentum, once again began its slow, inevitable acceleration. They all felt confident. Their strategy was sound. The human, with his slow plodding pace, was an irrelevance, but as the morning wore on, a new variable, one not accounted for in their algorithms, began to appear. The alien commentators who had been focused on the leading racers began to notice a strange anomaly on their screens. Ethan's bio-readings were climbing. His body temperature, which should have been at a steady, low-level burn, was elevated. His heart rate, which should have been a steady, consistent rhythm, was now elevated. The commentators, in their perfectly modulated voices, began to report on the human's impending failure. The Terran's vitals are in a state of high stress. One commentator's voice hummed with a concerned, clinical tone. He is pushing his biological limits. His system is showing every sign of a catastrophic collapse. It is only a matter of time before he has to stop. The other racers, who were now running into the midday sun, felt a sense of vindication. Their logic was correct. The human's continuous motion was a biological impossibility, a reckless gamble that would inevitably end in failure. But as they ran, they began to feel the effects of their own logical strategy. The Thranks, after their second series of explosive bursts, felt their muscles burn, their energy reserves depleted. The Sylvans, whose elegant, effortless sprints were now a painful reality, had to slow their pace. They were pushing their bodies to their logical breaking point, and their bodies were telling them to stop. But Ethan, the illogical Terran, felt none of this. What the aliens saw as catastrophic stress, his body saw as a state of endurance. His rising body temperature was a sign of his unique cooling system sweating at work. His elevated heart rate was a sign of his cardiovascular system working at a peak, sustainable efficiency. He was not on the verge of collapse. He was in his element. He was a biological machine built for one thing, and one thing only: to keep moving. And then, it happened. The Sylvan, whose body was screaming for rest, slowed to a walk. It was forced to stop a few hundred meters away. The Thranks, its 6 legs aching with exhaustion, had to do the same. They stopped to rest, their bodies begging them for a period of recuperation. As they sat on the ground, their scanners showed them a single, dim blip approaching. It was moving at a pace that was slow, steady, and utterly infuriating. It was Ethan Vance. The Thranks, a being of unimaginable power, watched in disbelief as the human, who was moving at a speed that... The second day of the race began. The Thranks and the Sylvans, whose perfect bodies had failed to account for the human's continuous motion, continued their sprints. They were now in a desperate, frantic race to make up for the ground they had lost while resting. But as they ran, their bodies screamed at them. Their algorithms were telling them that they were pushing themselves to a biological breaking point. They were no longer racing with elegant precision. They were racing with a frantic, illogical fear. Far ahead, the Duran, a silent, rolling juggernaut, had finally found its element. The course had led it to a vast, flat plain of hard rust-colored rock. It was a perfectly straight path for miles. The Duran began its slow, inevitable acceleration. It did not sprint. It did not leap. It simply rolled, its speed building with every rotation, until it was a blur of pure, unstoppable momentum. It was a perfect machine of motion, built for this exact purpose. The commentators, whose voices had been filled with confusion and doubt, now felt a surge of professional excitement. The Duran has found its terrain, one commentator's voice hummed with a renewed sense of hope. Its momentum is building, its speed is now unmatched. The Terran's strategy is a flaw in this terrain. The Duran will surely win. And for a time it seemed they were right. The Duran, a rolling blur of silicon, passed the Thranks and the Sylvans. The racers, whose bodies were weary from their frantic sprints, watched in disbelief. The Duran, a being of unstoppable speed, was now in the lead. The race was no longer a question of speed versus endurance. It was a question of who could maintain the most momentum. And the Duran was a master of momentum. But the human, a master of a different kind of knowledge, knew something that the Duran, a being of pure logic, could not comprehend. He knew the unwritten laws of this planet. He knew that this terrain, which seemed so perfect, was a trap. He had studied the subtle shifts in the wind, the strange, humid scent in the air, and the way the distant clouds had begun to gather. He knew a sudden torrential storm was coming. Just as the Duran reached its peak speed, the storm hit. The rain came down in a sudden, violent deluge. The hard, rust-colored rock, a perfect surface for the Duran's rolling momentum, became a slick, mud-covered trap. The Duran's smooth, rolling surface, designed for dry, hard ground, had no traction. Its momentum, its single, elegant weapon, was killed in an instant. It was forced to stop, a mud-covered boulder stuck in the middle of a flooded plain. Its logical, perfect form was useless in the face of an unpredictable, illogical force of nature. The Thranks and the Sylvans, with their agile, versatile bodies, were able to navigate the mud, but at a greatly reduced speed. They were no longer racing, they were just surviving. But far behind them, a solitary figure continued to move. The human, his body, built for a messy, chaotic world, was perfectly suited for this. His feet, with their intricate, primitive design, were perfectly suited for gripping the mud. The race was no longer a test of speed, it was a test of survival. The torrential downpour had passed, but it had left the course in a state of utter, muddy chaos. The once perfect trails were now a treacherous landscape of muck and slick rock. The Thranks and the Sylvans, whose elegant forms were ill-suited for the messy terrain, were forced to move at a snail's pace. The Duran, a mud-covered monument to the flaw of perfection, was still stuck, its momentum entirely killed. The alien commentators, their voices filled with a new, profound reverence, were now focused on a single figure, Ethan Vance. He had not stopped for over 48 hours, he had been moving continuously, a living paradox on a planet that had broken every other racer. His bio-readings were in a state that should be impossible for any known species. His body was running on pure brute endurance, fueled by a single, unblinking purpose. He was not an athlete, he was a machine of relentless, illogical will. The other racers, whose bodies were screaming for rest, felt a new kind of despair. They were not just physically broken, they were mentally defeated. They had been bested not by a faster opponent, but by an opponent who had a completely different understanding of what it meant to race. They looked at their own bodies, a marvel of biokinetics and graceful design, and saw a flaw. They had been built for a perfect, elegant race. The human had been built for this messy, chaotic, and unending march. And then, in the distance they saw it. The relic, a shimmering, ancient monolith that marked the finish line. The sight of it gave them one final, desperate burst of hope. The Thranks, with a final, agonizing effort, forced its body to leap. It was a magnificent, powerful leap, but its body screamed in protest. The Sylvans, with their elegant forms, attempted a sprint, their movements now a painful, desperate plea for a win. They were all running on fumes, their bodies on the verge of total collapse. But Ethan, the human, did not leap. He did not sprint, he simply continued to walk. His heart rate was a steady, low-level burn. His breathing was a quiet, almost silent hiss. He was not a burst of speed. He was an unstoppable, unblinking force of nature. He passed the Thranks as it landed, its body quivering with exhaustion. He passed the Sylvans as they faltered, their graceful forms trembling with the strain. He reached the relic, not with a flourish of victory, but with a simple, final, triumphant step. He was a small, unassuming man who had won the galaxy's most prestigious race with an act of pure, illogical human will. He touched the relic, and the victory lights blazed into a brilliant, stunning light, a beacon of a new kind of champion. The other racers, who had been so confident in their elegant, scientific approach to the race, watched in disbelief. They were defeated not by speed, but by something they could not even comprehend, a human's ability to simply not stop. The victory lights of the Grand Galactic Relic Run were a blinding cascade of light, a testament to a race won not with speed, but with an act of sheer illogical endurance. The other racers, who had prided themselves on their elegant, scientific approach to competition, could only stand and stare. The Thranx, with its powerful legs, was a machine built for explosive power. The Sylvans, with their lithe forms, were the embodiment of effortless grace. The Jiren, a monument to the elegance of momentum, and they had all been defeated by a small, unassuming Terran who had simply refused to stop. The alien commentators, their voices now filled with a bewildered reverence, reran the data. They analyzed the human's bioreadings, his heart rate, his body temperature, his muscle endurance. They looked for a flaw, a trick, a logical explanation for his win. They found none. The data showed that a human body should not have been able to endure such a continuous, grueling effort. The data was perfect, and it was telling them that the human's victory was an impossibility, but the impossible had just won. Later, in a quiet antechamber, the other racers approached Ethan, the Thranx leader. Its voice, a low, gravelly hum, projected a single question. Terran, our data shows that your body should have failed. Your biology is an anomaly. How did you endure? Ethan, tired but with a profound, knowing light in his eyes, gave them an answer that their logical minds could not comprehend. You see your bodies as perfect machines. You are built for a specific purpose, for a perfect race. My body is not a machine, it's a tool for chaos. For thousands of generations, my ancestors did not have speed. They had to endure, they had to survive. We did not run for sport, we ran for our lives. My body is built for one thing, and one thing only, to keep going.